Welcome to LaunchPod, a product management podcast from LogRocket. Today, our guest is Karla Fiske, Vice President of Product Management at Tebra. Having previously led customer-centric product orgs at Experian, Arbonne, and Chipotle, Karla stepped in as the first VP of Product for Tebra's Patient Experience Division in June 2022 and quickly garnered cross-functional support for a unified product roadmap. On today's episode, LogRocket's VP of Marketing, Jeff Wharton, talks to Karla about her experience with mergers, the significance of communication, objective setting, and focusing on outcomes over outputs, and the product placement strategy to provide and communicate projects effectively across departments to minimize escalations and align organizational objectives. So here it is, our conversation with Karla Fiske.
Hey, Karla. So happy to have you on today. Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much, Jeff, for having me.
Yeah, this is fun. I'm stoked. I feel like you've been doing a lot of stuff with us lately, but I'm really excited for this one because I finally get to sit down with you and chat through some stuff. I think we're going to hit some cool stuff.
Love it.
But first, I always used to shy away from this question because it's one of those, just seems very boilerplate. But at the same time, when you and I started out, like product was not something that they didn't teach in college. It wasn't what it is now. So everyone has a very unique path. So like, how did you go from how you started your career to where you are now? What was your path into product?
I started out knowing I wanted to be in the digital space, but didn't have any awareness of product management. I started as a data analyst working for a hardware software company, then moved into the automotive space doing more data analysis. I think back on that time and I'm like, man, like I didn't really like it, but I did it.
We've all been there.
Yeah, great peers, like fun company. But I didn't really love the job. And then, I definitely had some self-selection into, hey, there's things that I want to do differently. I'm not quite sure. Let's do some exploration. And then I had really my leader's leader was interested in moving me into an account management role and then into a web project management role. And so I just was moving around in this automotive.com company and was finding like, okay, I really like this mix of business problems and digital solutions. And like somewhere in between all of that intersection was interesting to me. And they brought in a new CMO a couple years into this automotive journey. And they started hiring a couple of new leadership and they brought in a director of product. And he was there to build a team. And so they tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, would you like to make a go of this? So there were 4 of us, me and 3 other gentlemen. And we had the best time. Like we would Rickroll each other. Like I don't know if you remember Rickroll. That goes back to the era. Yeah,
I remember that.
But we got pragmatic marketing certified. And then that became the start of my product management career. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always... Nowadays, I think people can come in and you can be a junior PM and then an associate PM and a PM and you spend your whole career doing that. But there was, a whole group of us who hit the right timing where it just became much more of a thing. And I'm always now intrigued about how people got into it. I think had I not stayed with marketing, that would have been my other focus because I do love, the product team will tell you here, I can't keep my mouth out of their meetings.
That's okay. It's okay. It's great. Yeah.
But to that, you rolled through marketing and kind of some of the other functions there into product management. That even once you hit product, though, you have done just so many different industries, like your healthcare now. You said auto. I think you did food. But, to do product, you have to understand what's going on and the customers and the process and everything. How do you enter a company like that? Or what's the process for when you switch cars to food? How does that work? What does that look like? How should other people look at this if they want to succeed in that kind of transition?
Yeah, transitioning industries is hard. So I think first and foremost, going into it thinking, okay, I have a lot to learn here and I want to learn it. So for me, it's a couple of different strategies. One is I love the First 90 Days book that's by Michael Watkins. I had a leader who was a mentor and then later became a boss. And she referred this book to me as I was making an internal transition. And it was a big transition within Experian. I remember going through this book and realizing wow, I've not really thought through a business in this way before. And that book really has been my strategy in ramping up in new companies, new industries, and really being thoughtful even before I accept the offer and before I step foot in that office or virtual office. What is it that I need to know and understand about this company? What questions do I need to ask in the interview process to understand what I'm walking into? So that book can even help in the decision-making process of selecting a company or industry. But yeah, I definitely highly recommend that book in a quick ramp up. And a lot of what Michael talks about is first constructing the state of the business. So is this a turnaround? Is it a hyper growth? Is it stabilizing, keeping the company operational? And then the other thing is really listening, asking questions, asking great questions, asking little questions, like anything around those understanding and really digging deep and listening. That's the biggest thing, I think, for me. And first 90 days, understanding that like, I'm not going to have the answers. I've definitely watched in my career, other leaders come into an organization and within 2 weeks have answers to all the problems that the company has. I think we all have, right? And
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what this book talks about is really like, you're not going to have the answers. You're there to help be part of solving those problems, but you're not going to have the answers. But what I could have, right, are tools in my toolbox that the organization may not have that I can share. But being really careful to prescribe solutions when I think I have most of the information or a lot of that information. Building internal networks is huge. For me, this was really finding my subject matter experts in the organization and really going deep with them. So building those relationships of like, they know everything. And so how do I foster those relationships and make sure that I'm using and not abusing them, right? And making sure that they feel like this is a valuable relationship for them too. So yeah, I think all of that for me has been a really powerful way to ramp up quickly. And then when I do start to provide possible solutions and brainstorming, and people that have worked with me know that I'm a very highly collaborative leader. When I do finally approach that, I'm going to probably have something that is worth listening to at that point, because I've spent a minute trying to understand the company and trying to ask all the questions that I can think of. And yeah, I think it's the other part of it too, right? In asking questions is being humble, right? You can't come in and be like, oh, I got this. You know, I came from fintech and that means I'm going to know direct sales. Not at all. Like, for me, what is this? This is crazy. This is so different. So yeah, so I think just being humble to be like, I actually don't know this. So help me understand it. You seem to have a lot of knowledge around this. Help me learn it. People are usually really excited to and willing to help.
People, yeah, I think people underestimate how much usually, especially in a good culture, people want to help and want to make you successful. But it's funny, you talk about going industry to industry, fintech to direct sales maybe. But I think we were talking earlier, I spent most of my career pretty much in tech and B2B SaaS and in a very specific stream. But even within that, company to company, what works at one is deleterious in another and just doesn't. And even I spent time at one company twice and joined it when it was a small startup and left after an acquisition and came back a couple of years later when it was 5x as big as when I had left. And it was interesting to see even what worked and what different and what changed within that company, but also that networking bubble helped me scale so much faster. I knew a lot of people from original when I was there the first time, and that was able to help me map out where I was able to understand things a lot faster. It helped me accelerate, but I was completely perplexed when it came to, what do you mean this doesn't work? That's how we did it 3 years ago and it worked perfect.
Yeah. Why is this different now? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's so important. When we hire people here, I tell them, never again in your time here will you be allowed to just learn, to not produce something, just learn and understand. Be greedy and take it as much as you can because you're never getting it again. I'm going to tell you right now.
That's exactly right. And what a good leader you are to give your employees and new hires that space. I think that's really invaluable. Yeah.
But I like the way you put it. So I think I'm going to steal some of this because it's put very well here. But that takes us to, so you've been through, like you said, healthcare, fintech, food, automotive. Now you're at Tebra, healthcare. You came in, and I think my understanding is the kind of what is Tebra now was a result of kind of a combination of two, was it companies or products? And so you had two big mandates to go through. Can you talk through a little bit on that?
Yeah. So Tebra is a company that is through an merging of two companies. Cario, which had been in the EHR space and really like supplying billing companies, revenue cycle management, software. And really, they were finding that there was this opportunity on not only patient engagement, but also patient acquisition and sort of the up funnel for small to medium-sized providers. And there was this kind of great symbiotic relationship that was formed between Cario and Patient Pop and the two co-founders at Patient Pop and the founder at Cario. And it was the sort of end-to-end solution for these SMB providers, these doctors or nurse practitioners that are moving away from the large enterprise systems into wanting their own private practice. So it's really the target market. And Patient Pop had the solution for patient acquisition, anything from the marketing, digital marketing around these practices to having a profile, a digital profile across the internet, to once acquiring a patient, to helping manage that patient into integrating into an EMR. So really it was from there that acquisition, or wasn't acquisition, it was a merger. In that merger, there was an opportunity to unify the platforms. So 2 different platforms, 2 different code bases, 2 different languages. Like, it was a thing. I came in 22 and the merger was finalized at the end of 21. So it was about 6 months into this journey. And I remember going through the interviews and several of the leaders were like, you know what you're getting into, right? Like, you realize this is a merger and they're messy. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I had been at Experian, and maybe we'll touch on this later, when there was this combining of 2 organizations to create a contact center organization. And I got to be part of that. So it was an internal merger. So a lot of the same change management and challenges and technologies, people, process, all of it that I got to go through with all the comforts of the Experian home, so to speak. So I had that experience going into this. I thought, okay, I can use that and apply that at this opportunity at Tebra. So Tebra was really around unifying these platforms to create a better provider experience ultimately. So I got to lead that. I remember 3 weeks in to my tenure there, we were at this leadership offsite between product and development. And I remember my boss being like, we were going through this unification brainstorm and sticky noting and all this extra. And then she's like, okay, this is going to be your program to take over. And I'm thinking like, wait, what? Oh my gosh, I am 3 weeks into my healthcare tech building of my experience. And I didn't have that really any of that experience coming into this. And so it felt very overwhelming and quite scary, to be transparent and vulnerable. But I also was like, okay, there's some reason that she's tapping into me and not others. So I'm going to lean into that. And I think having a fresh perspective coming into the organization allowed for a bit of, bipartisan approach of, okay, what is the right thing and how do we approach this? So I was able to lead through that in a cross-functional, so leading leaders ultimately to help go, okay, let's assess this. What are we working with? What do we think we need to move forward with? Let's brainstorm some of that. Let's dig into some of the technical design parts of this. How would we architect this? How would this work? How long would it take? What's critical path? What's secondary and tertiary? And so really it was a labor of love with a lot of different hands. And then that strategy, that unification strategy, evolved over time. There were things that influenced where we wanted to make investments, more critical points that required more investment, and other points that, that could wait in terms of like when and how we unified. Yeah, it was a big program. It still is a big program.
It makes sense, though, to bring in, I've been through mergers before, and if you're not careful, there's always someone has a favorite baby. You were baby neutral.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Baby neutral. I like that.
But because when I've been through them before, you always, even if people are operating impartially, there's always that someone gets upset. Oh, that person came from this department, so of course they're favoring that. It makes sense, but it really brings in. You talk about taking time to understand an org and feel through it and understand your kind of first team, and they just said, nope. 3 weeks in, let's go. You're up, Karla. So I'm sure you still had to do some of that stuff, though. So how did you find those right people, and how, what did that look like of putting together that navigational capability, knowing that all that was going on and what you were responsible for?
Yeah, I think it definitely made ramping up quite challenging because it was like, wow, I'm digging into learning two platforms, building the network, understanding technical limitations and what was at the table, right? Like just understanding some of that. Yeah, I think for me it was an opportunity to I feel like in my career I have answers, yes. We're going to arrive at the best solution, but ultimately the answers lie within the collective. I think I really feel like that's where if we can come together and really crystallize our leadership team, that first team, and really go, okay, what are we working to do and how do we get there? And what is the answer to this problem? And I think the opportunity in this unification program for me was how do we gel as a first team? And we went through some of that exercise around the first team and doing assessments there. Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And then he goes into another program around building that first team mentality. And so we were also amidst some of that. Because remember, we were 2 different organizations coming together. So like we've got leaders that are like, exactly, like this is my thing and this is my thing. And so having to blend those leadership teams, I was definitely more of that glue that kind of combined teams and helped collaborate together. So yeah, I think for me, what it did too was that it also delayed some of the details because it was like big picture and strategy and like tackling some big things. Whereas smaller details within the platforms were like, I'm not sure of that yet. Like I haven't had a chance to dig into that yet. And that was really hard as a leader to not have answers to detailed questions. You've been here 6 months. It's like, yes, but I've also been focusing on bigger things and those strategies. And so, yeah, so it delayed in some of those areas as a result.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense when you have both sides. You can be like, I think the glue to bring it together is a great metaphor there. And I'm sure your onboarding looked different as a result of that. But it almost, I wonder if that's a good way to do it. Just complete trial by fire. Here's a huge must-do project and just go. And it's kind of a forcing function.
It definitely was the time. Like there wasn't this opportunity to slow roll that, like, oh, you've got 60 days to settle into your role and then you'll start a program. It was like week 3. So it was like, cool, button up, here we go. But then it was amazing. I think for me, I tried to prioritize building those relationships, especially with my specific squads. And so really building those. And it was interesting because yes, it was the us and them or them and us. And to be that in between was a really great place to be. And then it was like, hey, there's a lot of really great people across the board here. Let's come together. And it definitely was challenging from a professional, even a personal level. It's like, oh my goodness, this is a lot, but exciting.
And through that, what did success look like? Was there a North Star metric you were tracking or a set of them, or what was guiding you on that?
With unification, it was a little tricky, honestly, to have a North Star metric. Like many B2B SaaS companies, we're operating off of NRR and ensuring we keep our customers loyal, right? We want loyal paying customers. But I think it was really around, in unification, it's a little different because we want to create a platform that not only our customers need, but also that they use, right? And that utilization of these really seeing through the ultimate merger vision, which was an end-to-end platform that providers can use. How we got there really was through creating more of these seamless interactions instead of one platform to the other platform, right? Like how can we integrate and create a more seamless interaction? So I think for us, it was, and getting really clear on that with leadership was, it was tough. I think we went through a couple of rounds of that. And if you were to talk to my peers and interview them, they'd probably say, yeah, it was tough to get there on really what are we aiming for? What does success look like? So we started to chip away at that. So a few things were for us that we wanted fewer products to manage, which sounds interesting. Wait, that's weird. But really what we had, and the reason why I was the chosen product leader over this space was because the patient experience products in the two platforms were overlapping. So it really was a like, okay, are we going to keep this one or keep that one? Or so really, how do we sunset the lesser product, keep the better product, right? Migrate it to a particular platform of choice. So that was one of the reasons why I was chosen. But then also to say, okay, I want the better product to manage. We want to eventually move to a single code base, right? Where we're working in a single language. I don't know when that day will come at this point, but that's still a goal. Less overhead, better integrated systems for our customers. And then ultimately that we're selling products that our customers are excited about, that are solving their problems, all the way from that patient acquisition through patient retention and everywhere in between.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a very natural transition, talking about what success looked like for that merger at Tebra. I would try and summarize this point, but I've heard you talk about it and you've done it far better than I can. So I'm just going to leave it to you. But you've talked a lot about outcomes and outputs. They're different. So first, what do you mean by that? But then you've talked about kind of companies you've walked into that focus on one or the other and how that drives accomplishment.
I've been in organizations in product management where I've seen both, and ultimately where product management has the greatest impact on the company's bottom line is being focused on outcomes over outputs. And so really thinking about how product and the work that we're doing ultimately will change the outcome of an organization and will impact revenue, impact customers' lives in a very real way, versus the idea of I'm doing something. So I've output a project, a program, I've launched something, and I've checked the box and I can move on. I've been at a company where, in particular, a company that had really big digital growth, and they were in it. Like, this was the hockey stick growth of time for them. And they had done a really great job of building a digital ecosystem. Like, they built it and people came, right? Like, they were ready. And it was great because a lot of those critical operational foundations had been set, which was exciting. I think the opportunity, though, in this particular organization was we weren't really measuring outcomes. So these projects would launch, these programs would launch, and then there would be like, okay, we're moving to the next thing and let's launch the next thing. And so when I came into the organization, this particular one, I was there to not only carry and mature this product org, but also to really focus on what is going to move the needle for this particular organization. And in that was able to lead through a cross-functional leadership group that sat outside of product, actually, to really align on the digital metrics that made the most impact on the organization. And having that collaboration across the landscape of a multi-faceted leadership team really allowed us to debate and discuss and land on impactful metrics that we all agreed digital would benefit from. And then it became how can we achieve those metrics? Marty Keegan talks a lot about this in his Empowered book, but I think once there's this North Star metric and there's these outcomes that we want to achieve as an organization, it becomes this enabler, really, to say, okay, teams, this is the metric you get to move. How are you going to do it? Versus hey, this is the thing you're going to go do and the output that I need you to achieve. So those are very different. I think a product team that is empowered has a metric that they're chasing and they're obsessed with, and they're constantly trying to hypothesize and then validate or invalidate, right? Those hypotheses through different actions and experiments to then go, okay, wait, we know how to move this metric and we're making progress towards that, or we need to retool and rethink how we're getting there. I think that empowerment is what product managers get excited about and really help fuel them. So I've been at both. I think it's been an opportunity to really reset in product. And as I mentioned, there was an opportunity to build this kind of cross-functional leadership team. And once we did that, there's an opportunity to then, from this up and out, be down and in. And in that down and in, really focusing back with the team to say, okay, these are the core metrics that we want to change. How do you see an opportunity to change them? think the challenge in the organization I was in at the time also was that we were working cross-functionally. So there were just operational things that needed to happen. Like, I got to launch this thing, or I have this thing. And so, yes, there are things that still need to be done operationally, but ultimately we should have the space to say, is this going to change? Is this going to change the outcome of the company, right? Or is it going to be something that I'm checking a box to do because somebody at a higher paying level told me to do it? So yeah, really then from there, it was building an operating model around how do we operationalize these metrics, and then getting clear on our objectives, the key results, what are we going after, and then creating visibility around that and accountability. So yeah, I think that was a big enabler for the organization to go from, cool, I'm just checking a box, I'm outputting what I need to output, to, wait a second, I make an impact on this digital organization, and here's how.
It's funny, as you were talking through that, I had in my head, this just sounds so much like Marty Kagan and Empowered. And I feel like lately he's on a tear about the theater of product management and feature teams and all that. And it's just so interesting to see in practice the pivot to driving empowered teams. And even to your point, there are some things maybe you just have to launch, you just have to get out. But even within that, it's understanding, why am I getting out? I have to get it out, but what is it meant to do so that you get it out, you check the box, and you also have that impact that's necessary.
Yeah, I think too, like, yes, you're exactly right. Leaning into that around, there is something I have to do in launch, but then asking the question of those higher paid folks that are making the decisions to do that work, like, okay, but why are we doing this? And asking the safe question around, I would like to better understand why are we doing this work, and what do we hope to achieve out of it? And I think asking those questions in a safe environment will yield really thoughtful responses that can help either validate for those leaders, like, yeah, I actually don't know. Like, I was told to do it, or it's the thing we do, or, oh, this will increase customers in our loyalty program, or this will increase the average daily users, like whatever it is that ultimately we can understand. I think asking the why is a really strong question.
Yeah, I tell the teams here that I work with that I want to explain the why, and I want everyone to understand. And if you don't feel like that, please raise your hand, sound the alarm bells, because while it's wonderful having, we have a medium-sized leadership team here and having a few people thinking about, we hire smart people. We hire you because you're smart. That's why you're here. It'd be much better to have 10, 20 really intelligent people thinking about this than 5 or 6, I guess we can claim to be smart, but maybe half intelligent people. Much better to have 20 really intelligent brains all thinking about it, but they can't do that if they don't have that understanding of, like, where is this going? What am I checking this box for? So that when we've pushed that, I feel like we've seen results explode in some things we didn't even expect to happen, or we didn't think of. People kind of go like, oh, well, we could do this, and you're going to get way more, like you said, customer retention, or way more engagement, or we could try this. And a lot of those things have been things that here at least have driven some of our biggest successes, has been when the team was able to understand that and come back and tweak what they were told to do, and tweak it and make it work in the operating practice that they were in. So yeah, such a good point. And this brings us to, I think, one of my favorite things I've heard you talk about, and it's such like a nit, I think, that I've heard before, but I really want to know more about it because it sounds super interesting, is you ran into a situation where that was a problem. Communicating the why and having everyone on the same page across a lot of people had been difficult, and you went out and you problem solved it. But the solution was not something I would have expected. This idea of the product placemat is just it. My team here will tell you I've talked about it a whole bunch. But can you tell us what that background is and what is it?
I think just to take a quick step backwards, having a really powerful network, I think externally from your organization, of other product leaders that you can bounce problems off of and get solutions is like my first sort of foyer into this conversation. And I bring that up because it's invaluable to have a network of external product leaders and that you can call on to work through the day-to-day problems or the bigger, meatier problems that you have and need to resolve. So for me, I had and still do this relationship with someone in a large e-commerce role in digital product management. And so we were peers, different industries, and we got paired up. I can't even remember exactly through the organization, but we got paired up. And Kristen and I hit it off. There was just a lot of really great sharing of problems and then possible solutions. I brought to her some of the problems that I was having in my current role and current company. And she brought up this solution that had worked for her at her large e-tailer. And I thought, wow, okay, I loved the idea, but I put it in my back pocket and I kept this product placement template. Fast forward, literally 6 months later, I'm sitting in the office of my CTO, and he's explaining to me the problem. And just to build up into the solution, it's helpful to understand that the situation was this digital organization for product was supporting digital product across a fragmented product organization. So you've got digital marketing reporting into a CMO. You've got digital technology and product reporting into technology. You've got customer care and the digital support system reporting into a different executive. So you've got this sort of fragmented digital approach. And in all of that, you've got all these people needing things, right? All these executives and different functions that need digital solutions. And so it was this compounding list of things that they needed or problems they needed solved. And everyone has their things. And so I'm sitting in his office, the CTO's office, and he's like, we're getting too many escalations. We need to solve this problem. And I want you to figure out a way in order to prioritize this work and communicate the work. Now, we were already prioritizing it, but what we weren't doing effectively, and the opportunity was really how we communicated that work up and out. And he also brought up a point of do you have a forum by which people could debate these things across all of the digital stakeholders? And I thought, no, I don't. I built these amazing relationships throughout the organization, and I was definitely the bridge builder, but I wasn't creating a forum to have all of that collective conversation. Within a week, I was like, I have the tool. I pulled this product placemat out and reformatted it. I personalized it for the organization that I was in at the time and took a go at it. And really, this was a progress over perfection. So pulled together a list of key results at the top. What is our ultimate objective? And then how are we going to get there? And so what a product placemat is and how I've utilized it is to compartmentalize the work that needs to get done in order to achieve the objectives and key results. An example of some of this is you can have certain business as usual things that need to occur, right? There's certain campaigns that always need to launch or a loyalty program that has to go live on a seasonality. Then you've got stability, scalability, security. Those are things you not invest in, right? Any digital officer will tell you, you got to always be chipping away at those things, right? And then you've got these new opportunities, these things that will come up that are oh, this is super hot. Can we move fast? And then you've got bigger programs that need to be chipped away at. And then you've got things that are I'm thinking this might happen. We might have this big partnership. We might have this big program. We might have this secret thing that's coming. And then you've got work that ultimately month to month, you're we deprioritize that. It's not as important. So this product placemat really allows it's a one sheet view at all of this work at a super high level. So it has been transformational. So I went from having these escalations up to the CTO to within 3 months of meeting monthly, having virtually no noise. There was no escalations. There was now this monthly meeting where we could talk about what was coming on the placemat, what had launched, the results of that launch. And this ties back to outcomes. This was the forum that I could hold my team accountable to saying, hey, you launched this thing 3 months ago. Let's talk about how it's doing. We launched it last week. Let's talk about how that's doing. And really to say hey, marketing, you wanted us to launch this really cool new thing. Here's how it did. Or give them the forum to tell us, tell us how it did, right? What were the impressions? What was the conversion? How did the funnel look? And so it really was an amazing tool in order to kind of level set across all of digital, gain that alignment, and be very clear on what our key results needed to be and how we would get there.
For people listening, we lucked into a copy from Karla, so we'll link it in the notes if anyone wants to check it out. But yeah, I love how that just ties together everything we've talked about. How do you understand what's important in an org? How do you understand who's important? And to do this placemat, right, you have to have the right people. You have to bring them together and understand their priorities. You have to understand outcomes, not just outputs. So it's such a good model. This is why I was like, the whole time I was just waiting to talk about this, because I love this thing so much. It's so cool. But yeah, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Kind of brings us full circle, solves a lot of problems we've talked about. And Karla, I really appreciate you coming on. This is so educational on my part. I felt like I learned a lot. I use that placemat already, so I'm going to keep doing that.
I love that. Yeah, like clear strategy is awesome, but if we're not communicating it up and out and down and in, it's really hard to gain that full org alignment. So I'm so glad it works.
Thank you, Karla.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.